You show up early. You stay late. You follow the rules. You sacrifice your time, your health, your silence for the job, the team, the future you were promised. You do the right thing, even when no one is watching. You give more than you take. You endure, while others cut corners and rise faster. And somehow you're still stuck. Still waiting. Still wondering when it will be your turn. So you ask yourself, what did I do wrong? But maybe that's not the question. Maybe the real question is, what lie was I taught to believe? You see, we've been raised in a story. A story that says, work hard, and life will reward you. Be good, and you will be seen. Sacrifice, and someday it will all pay off. But what if that story was never about truth? What if it was about control? What if morality, the kind they preach in employee handbooks and childhood lessons, wasn't a path to success, but a leash? What if your suffering is not a sign of honor, but a symptom of programming? Because here's the truth. The system doesn't reward virtue. It rewards leverage. And those who rise aren't always the ones who worked the hardest. They're the ones who learned how the game is played, while you were still playing by the rules. From the time you were a child, the story was whispered into your ear. Be good, work hard, don't complain, and life will be fair. At school, they told you to sit still and raise your hand, that obedience would be rewarded. At home, they told you to share, to sacrifice, to say sorry even when you were the one hurting. At work, they told you to stay late, to be a team player, to do it for the culture, and you believed them. Because what else does a person have if not belief? You carried that story into adulthood like a sacred script. You kept your head down. You kept showing up. You did more than was asked. You thought the world would notice, but it didn't. Instead, you watched others rise, those who talked more than they delivered, who smiled in meetings but took credit for your work, who knew how to charm, to manipulate, to move quietly through loopholes. And you were told, just be patient, good things take time. But years passed, and the promotions didn't come. The praise was sparse. The peace never arrived. So you began to question yourself. Am I not enough? Did I not give enough? But the lie doesn't live in your effort. It lives in the equation you were taught. Hard work reward. Not in this system. Not when value is defined by power, and power is defined by positioning, not perseverance. Because in a world built on leverage, not loyalty, the ones who win are not the ones who try the hardest, but the ones who understand where the strings are pulled. And when you believe that effort is enough, you become easier to control. Easier to keep quiet. Easier to keep waiting for the applause that never comes. So the real question is not, why am I not winning? The real question is, who benefits when I believe this lie? Because someone does. Someone profits from your exhaustion. Someone gains from your silence. Someone collects the rewards while you're too tired to ask where they went. Let's step back. You were told this was a meritocracy, that if you just worked harder than the next person, the ladder would lift you. But look around. A nurse pulls a 12-hour shift. She misses birthdays, meals, sleep. She holds life in her hands and goes home worried about rent. A construction worker rises before dawn. In the heat, in the cold, in the noise, he builds the world we live in. But he retires with just enough to survive, if he's lucky. And then there's the influencer. The one who dances in rented Lamborghinis, sells secrets they never followed, and makes more in a single day than the nurse earns in a month. Why? Because value, in this system, is not based on effort. It's based on control. It's not what you produce. It's what you leverage. The nurse can save one life at a time. The investor can move billions with a single click. The engineer can code through the night. But the CEO decides if that code is ever used. This isn't broken. This is how it was built. You were taught to create value, but you were never taught to own it. Because ownership of capital, of influence, of attention, that's where the true game begins. The people who rise aren't always the most honest, most skilled, or most loyal. They're the ones who understand how value moves and who holds the gate. You were taught to work. They were taught to position. You were told to sacrifice. They were told to strategize. And that's the quiet cruelty of it all. You weren't wrong to be good. You were just told that goodness was enough. It's not. Not in a world where systems are designed to extract, not uplift. Where profit is built on burnout. Where obedience is rewarded with survival, but never with sovereignty. You were trained to be a gear in a machine owned by someone else. To be dependable. To be replaceable. To be grateful. But let's be honest, gratitude doesn't pay the bills. Sacrifice doesn't build freedom. And silence doesn't rewrite systems. So when you see others rise with less effort, less integrity, less commitment, don't mistake it for injustice. See it for what it is. They were playing a different game. A game of power, not morality. A game of perception, not perseverance. You weren't taught to play that game. You were taught to believe in it. But belief doesn't change results. And here's the turning point. Once you see the strings, you no longer move like a puppet. This belief didn't begin at your first job. It began in childhood. You were taught to raise your hand, to wait your turn, to sit still, to not interrupt. You were praised for being quiet, rewarded for being agreeable, punished, sometimes subtly, for questioning too much. Be a good boy, be a good girl, don't talk back. Follow the rules and good things will come. You were given a rule book and told to treat it as sacred. But some children, quietly, invisibly, were taught something else. They were taught how to charm, how to bend rules without breaking them, how to smile while taking more than their share. While you were learning discipline, they were learning tactics. While you were told not to be selfish, they were learning to negotiate. You were being trained to serve. They were being trained to lead. And it wasn't malicious. It was conditioning. Passed down through families, schools, and culture, a silent curriculum that shapes who becomes obedient and who becomes powerful. You see, it wasn't just about rules. It was about beliefs. You were taught to believe in the just world fallacy, the comforting idea that the world is fair, that good people are rewarded, that hard work always pays off. It gave meaning to pain. It gave hope to struggle. But it wasn't true. And it never was. Because the world doesn't distribute reward by effort. It distributes reward by position, by strategy, by power. And yet you internalized every failure as personal. When you were passed over, you thought, I didn't work hard enough. When someone less qualified got ahead, you wondered, what's wrong with me? You didn't question the system. You questioned your own worth. That's the final trick of the programming. It doesn't just make you obedient. It makes you blame yourself for the outcomes it was designed to create. So while others are rewriting the rules, you're trying harder to follow them. You keep turning the pages of that old rule book, hoping the ending will change. But it won't. Because you weren't given a path to power. You were given a path to compliance. And every time you believe that suffering is noble, that being overlooked means you need to be more patient, you reinforce a script written by those who never intended for you to win. It's not your fault you were handed that story, but it is your responsibility to question it. Because the moment you realize the system doesn't reward goodness, it rewards awareness. That's the moment you start reclaiming your power. They told you to be good, to be humble, to sacrifice, to stay grateful. And you listened. Because morality sounded like something worth believing in. Like something that would protect you. Like a shield for the soul. But what if that shield was actually a cage? Friedrich Nietzsche called it slave morality. A value system not born from power, but from powerlessness. When you can't win by force, you rewrite the rules of what winning means. You claim that obedience is strength. That humility is superior to boldness. That suffering somehow makes you pure. You glorify the one who endures, not the one who transforms. And slowly, quietly, you learn to feel guilty for wanting more. You silence your anger. You dull your ambition. You confuse silence for serenity. But deep down, something inside you knows, if obedience was truly power, then the most obedient would be the most free. But they're not. They're the most used, the most drained, the most forgotten. The world celebrates their loyalty, but forgets their names. It hands them plaques, not ownership. It gives them titles, not leverage. Because the system doesn't fear the obedient. It feeds on them. Virtue in this context isn't freedom. It's a strategy, crafted by the powerful to pacify the rest. And it's brilliant. Because when you believe your suffering is sacred, you won't rebel. You'll stay. You'll keep working. You'll keep waiting. You'll wear your exhaustion like a badge. You'll tell yourself one day they'll see. They'll reward me. They'll choose me, but they won't. Not because you're unworthy, but because the game wasn't built to notice you. It was built to use you. So the real question becomes, what if your morality is not your strength, but your chain? What if the belief that being good is enough is the very thing holding you back? This doesn't mean you abandon your values. It means you wake up to how they've been weaponized. It means you stop offering your integrity to systems that only reward your silence. It means you realize you were taught to serve in a world that only rises by strategy. So if you're tired of being praised but not promoted, respected but not rewarded, seen but never chosen, know this, you're not broken. You're programmed, and now you're waking up. You stay late. You say yes. You take the extra shift again. You do what others won't. And what do they give you? A thank you email. A slightly larger Christmas bonus. Maybe a new title with no raise attached. Just enough to make you feel seen. Never enough to make you powerful. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The more obedient you are, the more the system profits from your silence. And so it feeds you in crumbs. Small recognitions. Empty gestures. Occasional upgrades to keep your hope alive. They don't want to lose you. But they don't want to free you either. Because a free person asks questions, sets boundaries, negotiates. A dependent person? They stay grateful, even when they're drowning. So the trap is set early and set deep. You're rewarded just enough to stay loyal, but never enough to walk away. You're told to wait your turn, to be patient, to keep proving yourself. But behind the curtain, the rules are different. While you're perfecting the spreadsheet, someone else is learning how to own the company. While you're refining your skill, they're refining their influence. And the system is designed for them, not you. Strategic underpayment is not an accident. It's a tactic. Because as long as you're underpaid, you're under pressure. You're easier to manage. Less likely to leave. Too tired to question. You don't demand. You don't rebel. You just keep producing. You become useful. Not because you're weak, but because you believe in a game that was never meant to pay out. And the most brilliant part? They've made you feel proud of that. Proud of the long hours. Proud of the grind. Proud of your ability to keep going without ever arriving. But listen closely. Pride is not the same as power. And gratitude is not the same as growth. If the system truly valued your work, you wouldn't be surviving. You'd be thriving. But it doesn't. It values your output, your obedience, your loyalty. Not you. And until you see this, you will keep mistaking recognition for reward and hope for a plan. Because they don't need to trap you with chains. They only need to trap you with promises. The system gives you just enough to keep you quiet, not enough to set you free. And that's not your failure. That's its design. The only question is, how much longer will you trade your potential for applause? You're not failing. The game was rigged before you started playing. You're tired. Not just physically, but soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that no weekend can fix. The kind of weariness that comes from carrying an invisible weight for years. And maybe you've started to question if something's wrong with you. Why you haven't made it. Why all your sacrifices haven't paid off. Why, after doing everything right, it still feels so wrong. But let me tell you something that no manager, no system, no boss will ever say. You are not broken. You are waking up. That feeling inside you, the frustration, the disillusionment, the quiet bitterness creeping in after every unacknowledged effort. It isn't dysfunction. It's the early tremor of awareness. Because the truth is brutal but freeing. You're not failing. The game was rigged before you started playing. You were handed a script. Be polite. Be loyal. Work hard. Be grateful. And the world will take care of you. But now you're seeing the cracks. You've noticed how some rise faster by saying less and playing dirtier. How image often outweighs integrity. How perception bends the rules while principle gets trampled underfoot. And it stings. It's tempting to collapse into cynicism. To say, what's the point? To assume the system is too big, too corrupt, too far gone. But there's another path. Clarity. Burnout doesn't always mean you're weak. Sometimes it means your soul is rejecting a false bargain. The pain you feel? It's not just from overworking. It's from waking up in a world that profits off your unconscious loyalty. A world where your suffering is quietly monetized. Where your morality is applauded but not rewarded. Where the promises fed to you in childhood about fairness, virtue, and making it turn to dust the moment you ask for more than survival. So pause here. Let it in. This isn't failure. This is the rupture before transformation. You are no longer the obedient worker chasing invisible carrots. You are the witness. The one who has stopped clapping for a game that does not serve you. And that awareness? It's the first step toward power. Because until now they had your energy and your belief. But now, they only have your attention. And that changes everything. Stop asking to be rewarded. Start learning how to reward yourself. So what now? Now that you see the game, now that the illusion of moral labor has cracked, what do? You shift. Not from good to ruthless. Not from honest to manipulative. But from obedient to strategic. You stop being just the worker. And you start becoming the architect of your own effort. This is the moment where morality becomes conscious. Where doing the right thing no longer means letting others walk all over you, but choosing when, where, and how your values are expressed without being exploited. They told you, be kind, be helpful, be a team player. But they never told you that kindness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. That helpfulness without leverage becomes invisible. That being a team player in a rigged game just makes you easier to move around. You don't stop being good. You start being good on your own terms. That's what strategic morality means. It means asking yourself, who deserves my energy? What systems am I upholding, and do they reflect my values? Am I giving out of fear or from alignment? Because the truth is, goodness without self-awareness is not virtue. It's vulnerability. So instead of handing your loyalty to every job, every project, every person who asks for it, you learn to invest it, carefully, intentionally. You learn how to say, no, that's not my responsibility. I need rest before I give more. Well, if I'm going to pour myself into something, I need ownership, not just obligation. And slowly, your life starts shifting. You build leverage, not by working more, but by working smarter. You develop value, not just in what you do, but in what you own. You create boundaries, not as walls, but as filters, protecting the integrity of your time, your energy, your soul. That's how you reclaim power in a system that wants you docile. Because here's the secret they hope you never learn. The most powerful people aren't always the loudest, the wealthiest, or the most connected. They are the ones who stopped asking for permission. They stopped begging to be seen. They stopped waiting for fairness. And they started building lives where they didn't have to beg in the first place. You can do that too. Not by discarding your values, but by defending them with strategy. Not by abandoning goodness, but by embodying it with clarity. Not by playing someone else's game, but by choosing which game is worth your time. So no, you don't need to become ruthless. But you do need to become conscious. Stop asking to be rewarded. Start learning how to reward yourself. Not someday. Not when they finally notice. But now. Because your worth was never theirs to give. It's yours to claim. Stop asking to be rewarded. Start learning how to reward yourself. So, what now? Now that you see the game, now that the illusion of moral labor has cracked, what do? You shift. Not from good to ruthless. Not from honest to manipulative. But from obedient to strategic. You stop being just the worker. And you start becoming the architect of your own effort. This is the moment where morality becomes conscious. Where doing the right thing no longer means letting others walk all over you, but choosing when, where, and how your values are expressed without being exploited. They told you, be kind. Be helpful. Be a team player. But they never told you that kindness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. That helpfulness without leverage becomes invisible. That being a team player in a rigged game just makes you easier to move around. You don't stop being good. You start being good on your own terms. That's what strategic morality means. It means asking yourself, who deserves my energy? What systems am I upholding? And do they reflect my values? Am I giving out of fear or from alignment? Because the truth is, goodness without self-awareness is not virtue. It's vulnerability. So instead of handing your loyalty to every job, every project, every person who asks for it, you learn to invest it, carefully, intentionally. You learn how to say, no, that's not my responsibility. I need rest before I give more. If I'm going to pour myself into something, I need ownership, not just obligation. And slowly, your life starts shifting. You build leverage, not by working more, but by working smarter. You develop value, not just in what you do, but in what you own. You create boundaries, not as walls, but as filters, protecting the integrity of your time, your energy, your soul. That's how you reclaim power in a system that wants you docile. Because here's the secret they hope you never learn. The most powerful people aren't always the loudest, the wealthiest, or the most connected. They are the ones who stopped asking for permission. They stopped begging to be seen. They stopped waiting for fairness. And they started building lives where they didn't have to beg in the first place. You can do that too. Not by discarding your values, but by defending them with strategy. Not by abandoning goodness, but by embodying it with clarity. Not by playing someone else's game, but by choosing which game is worth your time. So no, you don't need to become ruthless, but you do need to become conscious. Stop asking to be rewarded. Start learning how to reward yourself. Not someday. Not when they finally notice. But now. Because your worth was never theirs to give. It's yours to claim.